Hi, this is Phil, and I'm here to tell you all about the Capes and Lunatics Patreon. Get early access to all of our interviews, including the monthly Chichester Chats with writer and comic book legend D.G. Chichester, new episodes of classic Capes and Lunatics shows, including The Quantum Zone, This, That, or the Third, and many, many more specials, all completely uncensored. Access starts for $3 a month, full video when you pledge $5 a month. Check out the link in our show notes, or go to patreon.com/CapesandLunatics. Hope to see you there. Hello and welcome back, kids. Time for another episode of the Chichester Chats with me, Phil, Lilith, and of course, that other guy, Mr. D.G. Chichester. Hello, sir. Oh, maybe we should say that mythical figure, Mr. D.G. Chichester.
That mythical, see, I was going to get a mythical reference in, but you beat me to it. Yes, good to see you guys. Thank you. Always good to be let in with some heavy metal music on a Saturday morning. So that's I feel exactly. I'm channeling my inner Metallica. So
yeah, because we are talking. Well, a Hercules story did from 1990 for Marvel Superheroes Spring Special #1.
Was there a Marvel Superheroes Spring Special #2? I did not look.
I think they did it like seasonally, so I forget. Like #2 might have been summer or something. I think. Yeah,
yes, I think you're right. Yep. And the numbering was probably just as convoluted. So Marvel Summer Special #1, but it's the spring. Never mind.
Yeah. Again, people always say comic book numbering is convoluted today. It's always been convoluted.
There it is.
Mm-hmm.
And look, he gets top billing, sort of, almost, maybe equal top billing at least.
That smug look on his face.
Exactly, it's Hercules.
Exactly. All right, so let's get into this. So, was this another Dr. Druid situation where you're like, where you're just like, is this Hercules story going to get the attention of the editor? Or?
I had sort of forgotten this story until you guys brought it up, and it's in my whatever archives or stuff, but not something I had immediately thought about, and I cannot remember exactly when this would have come in, but this feels like it was this was a much more kind of integrated into the mix of actually working story. Like Druid was early on. This would have been like some stuff was cooking, right? We were doing some stuff. We were doing probably the Shadow Line or whatever. So I think this was more offered to us. I don't think we pitched this. I can't remember the details. But I will say reading it was a much different comparison to the Druid conversation. Where I think I said, it was a very serviceable story, but I could sort of see somebody turning the gears on everything. I could see me and Margaret sort of like turning the gear, putting the gears in place, that the teeth mesh together, actually cranking it, make sure there's an introductory caption and make sure there's this and make sure there's kind of like this ham-handed, payoff. This felt much more kind of both polished and in a lot of ways, I think, sort of representative of maybe whatever I've been good at, and not disrespective of Margaret's role in it, but it seems to hit on a lot of things that I've always enjoyed. There's sort of passion for the little people. There's drawing from research, and mythology, obviously hugely with Hercules and pulling up, a lot of the Hercules mythos and then incorporating into the story. There's, I think, some, witty dialogue and, byplay and back and forth and a kind of a, cleverish payoff, not just about the beating down, but, the beating down comes sort of out of the story. And it was fun. It was fun read in that. And I didn't feel like it had that artifice of Druid, to me, at least, so want to see what you guys, thought.
No, I liked it. I was going to say, were you a fan of mythology, or I mean, did you have?
Of course he was.
I was going to say he went right to the M section of the Chichester files. He's like, my mythology folder. Here we go.
Yeah, I mean, I think I became an over fan of mythology. Like in a lot of ways, you dive too deep into things at a certain point, and then you start to get lost in yourself. And as my friend Greg Wright, has often, said and accused me of, stop trying to prove to people how well read you are. You dive into something, and then you start to go too deep, right? And you start to draw too many obscure references But this feels like, a sweet spot, in that. I mean, I always, I think one of my first, real core books was the famous Bullfinch's Mythology, which is, is a great, just collected edition of Greek, myths, and I'm sure I drew from that one, and others, at that point, what I could find. And I've continued to read, great books on myths and reinterpretations of them, or representations of them. Neil Gaiman did one on Norse mythology, recently, and there have been a couple other ones, that sort of like made the myths more conversational. It's the same stories, but they just come forward in different ways, and there's just so much going on there that you can draw from and sort of be inspired by, and when you read through them, other writers and other creators did the same thing. Adamantium, shows up in mythology, long before it does, in comic books. So, and I that was certainly something that even, especially when I was working with Margaret as well, would have been a interest of ours. We both had interests in sort of drawing from factual, mythological things as a jumping off point so that stories would have certain integrity. So as opposed to just doing, well, Hercules is a big guy and he drinks mead, and that's in here too. But here's a way to kind of dive into the many, many stories of Hercules and not just make it the expected ones, right? Everyone sort of knows the great feats of Hercules, and he strangled the snakes as a kid, or, cleaned out the, the fields, or, killed the lions, or whatever, things he did, or he's just a big, strong guy. But, we went a little not obscure, but, pulled something that was part of the true myths. And those are just, you don't just re-represent them, you find ways to kind of delve into them. And I think we did that in a fun way.
No, I thought it was a very good Hercules story, and it's something different, I think, because you actually got into this flashback of Hercules and like this tragedy and stuff. And again, you kind of got into the guy, because a lot of the Marvel comics sometimes they just portray him. It's like, oh, here comes Hercules, that big boastful, egotistical guy, and of course, yeah, he's a god, so he's gonna have an inflated sense of himself, but. Right. Yeah, they really don't get into, who is this guy? Why is he like this? Besides, he's a god, but so.
Yeah.
I mean, that explains most of it, honestly.
Well,
most
mythological
characters that are like
he's a god.
gods.
Exactly. Yeah, he's a god, and that's there, right? And but that's always the more fun part of doing characters like that, is finding those little things. They don't have to be, there's angst in it, but it's not all angst. He's still Hercules, but. He's got to, all the gods were flawed. All the mythical gods were deeply flawed, in terms of, ego and angst and, worry and stuff like that. It's a fun show if you haven't seen it, this Jeff Goldblum Chaos show that's on Netflix, where he's Zeus. I'm not sure if he's playing Zeus or just the home life of Jeff Goldblum, actually. But if, it's got all the gods. And it's, the conceit is sort of like, it's modern day, but everyone still worships the gods and the mythical gods, the Greek gods, and everybody, and they're all represented in one way or another. So they're massively powerful, but, Poseidon not only can control the seas, but, he lives on a super yacht, it's, Olympia's, 10 times Jeff Bezos, super mansion, that type of thing, with a lot of pool boys running around, for, Zeus and Hera to command and, clap their hands and kill when they're, when they don't get their, crust cut off their sandwiches properly, that sort of thing. So that's also the appeal of the myths, right? Is that they are not just about fantastic situations, but the humans and the gods in them represent sort of human values and human flaws, drastically exaggerated. So I think that's why they literally stand the test of time, and why they become really interesting fodder, to kind of get through.
So the book overall has with Speedball being the oddball out, obviously, like magic within some kind of mythological framework. So do you think that they just like had like all these like back issues? They're like, oh, what can we put together? Or was this like specific? Was there like going for a specific thing? Do you remember?
It's, I wasn't part of the editorial mission, behind it, but I think it is, as ever with those things, I don't even know if they still do things like this, right? Probably not, but they were showcases for underused characters, right? Characters who didn't have their own platforms, their own, books to sort of put out there. And you're trying to show them up, right? Show them, give them a showcase, right?
Well,
they don't have their own.
Three Horses will do that.
Yeah, it may not be a launching off point for anything. It's probably not going to be, but it's a chance to kind of just have a fresh look at them. These stories, to my knowledge, certainly ours, wasn't, as we've talked about before, an inventory story, waiting to be run, and here comes the spring special, and let's just slot in a bunch of stories that we had sitting around. This was commissioned for this sort of annual. We're doing this story. Do you guys want to do a Hercules story? Or maybe we heard there was a special coming up and maybe we pitched the story, whatever way it went. I mean, it was a much more, you're part of the process than Druid was when we were out of it. But I think that's the rationale behind it, is it's like, Hercules doesn't have his own book, but he's kind of well liked, and when he does show up, so here's, doing this, Magique is, obviously gets a lot of profile in New Mutants or whatever, but she's a popular character. She doesn't have her own book. Maybe she's had a limited series or something. Here's another chance to kind of promote her. And, it's also always a good opportunity. I don't know if the thinking went this far, but, you want to showcase characters from a copyright, point of view. So that Hercules, as an example, vastly diluted because Marvel can't own Hercules overall, right? Too much of a literal history of, many, 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 many Hercules, but their Hercules and their interpretation of them, needs to be refreshed and reminded and put to work in an official capacity every now and again, just to make sure. So if Hercules wasn't in standard rotation in, say, the Avengers at that point, this would have been a place to sort of like, let's make sure we get Hercules out there. That sort of thing. One appearance, check the box for the next, whatever, 18 months, 5 years, whatever the clock, gets reset and, thinking about. But, so I don't think there was like a real, and you could see the mishmash, like you said, of Speedball and Magique and Hercules and whoever else is in there.
Moon Knight.
Moon Knight. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't a theme book. It wasn't like, you could sort of argue Hercules and Moon Knight, mythological sort of things if we had added in something else, but it wasn't that. It was just,
yeah. I mean, Black Panther's in there.
Yeah. Maybe that's
like magic and.
Yeah.
It's
right, but they weren't integrated into like one Uber story, or there wasn't a crypt keeper at the beginning saying, across the mythologies of heroes, there are many who come together. That would have been possible, but nobody went to that trouble.
Oh, that would have been a great. That would have been a great first page, like a Crypt Keeper type thing. But it's DeFalco like chomping on a cigar, be like, yeah,
exactly, like standing on Olympus, in like in a toga. I'm sure Tom would have been up for that. A t-shirt and a toga, and a cigar.
So you think the whole mission statement here was that, let's see if anything, if any of these characters like strike a chord with anyone, or maybe even is it just, oh, hey, let's get a name out there in the consciousness? Because I think Mark Spector Moon Knight the series started not too long after this. So.
Maybe. I mean, again, I think these were also just part of the annuals, that sort of came out. This wasn't technically an annual, but it has that same sort of feeling, right? Mm-hmm. Of a little bit of an omnibus book with several stories featuring, Punisher annual, the, Cap annual. These are places to sort of like run more stories outside of the regular mix of books. So the spring specials, felt like a good way, to fill the queue, to keep things kind of going out there. And if I was to looking at it intellectually at the time and then looking at it through the veil of time, as it were, that's kind of what they existed for, right? Marvel is in the business, or any publisher like that is in the business of putting out product, keeping their characters, of interest, keeping the readers entertained and coming back to Marvel. And boy, I really like Hercules in the Avengers, which most readers I think did, because it was like, sort of a short dose character. You get, I'm sure you can do, and I'm sure there has been, full on miniseries just featuring Hercules, but too much of a good thing in that way, it loses its appeal. And you can sort of stretch that out, but people like him in the Avengers because he comes in, he does his thing, he goes up against Thor, he overcomes his ego and does something heroic, and then he, falls to the back of the pack again. But when you devote too much time to him, invariably, if you're going to play him right, he becomes this egotistical, overbearing bear, and that's not really that interesting to read, unless his name is Lobo. But so you could do it, but I think it's just a way to play a character like that out. And from a creative point of view, and I don't say this with any real remembrance of doing it. Like I can't picture working on this like I've said that I could picture working on the first time we created, Terror, or Shrek, for the Shadowline stuff. That I can literally see in my head, us working on that. But I can see that we had a lot of fun with this. I can feel that kind of coming off the page and the naturalness of this, the setup of it. There's a few ridiculous Marvel moments in this, like, the god of the demigod, the most famous demigod of all time, just casually befriends this, schlemiel, to use a New York term, and decides to go to a New York dive.
Yeah.
No, he's a nice guy, but he's a little bit of a schlemiel, but he's just like, he's a nebbish, and he's like, oh, let's go have let's go have a drink at a New York dive bar. And then let me go to your low rent rent fest. Cause I got nothing else to do this weekend, and I actually appreciated that casualness of that. It feels kind of ridiculous on one hand, but I'm glad that we embraced it.
We've all been there.
No, but you at some latter point with some things, I think I took things too seriously and didn't embrace that casual integration within, the world accepts this stuff.
Yeah, it's the Marvel universe. You could be walking down the street, right. You might run into an alien. You run into the actual Hercules.
We were talking about yesterday. It's like, oh, is that a puddle? Did it rain last night? No, it was Hydro Man. Stupid.
Exactly right. Exactly. So so that was that was ridiculous, but it's also the fun of it, right?
I mean, I kind of buy it too, though, because with a character as old as Hercules, I guess he's just like, well, hey, well, let me go, with this guy and see what's up with this whole Renaissance fair and stuff. Maybe it'll be a new experience in my 1,000 years, because what haven't I done at this point?
Right. Well, that's it. I think that was sort of the feeling, like, yeah, why not? And then of course it kind of turns, right? It turns in this sort of like weird, this weird twisty way, and that's not, then it gets sort of upsetting for him. But it's just kind of just silly, like silly in a good Marvel way. Again, he's just sitting there and like having mead at whatever, the dive bar.
I love that panel at the fair when he has like that giant basket under his arm, just full of food. He's just like pulling food, like bread or whatever.
Right. Yeah, that overindulgence, right? Of of who he is.
Well, he's working it off. I mean, he's not skipping leg day or anything. No.
He burns a lot of calories. Yeah.
And then. I don't know how I want to spoil. I don't know how to spoil this, but yeah, just the whole Arrow thing, and then the actual villain. I thought that was interesting, especially how he gets rid of him at the end.
Yeah, well, that's sort of the appeal, and anyone who wants to dive into the spoilers, pick up a good Hercules myth book.
Is this on the app, Phil?
It is not. That was going to be my other question. It's not on the app. I don't think you can get it digitally anywhere. And I don't know if we've discussed this before, but is it just like a rights thing? Because there's so many writers and artists and everything that they would have to figure out a payment system for everyone. Is it?
I don't know. I know nothing about that. I mean,
because it seems
go ahead.
I was going to say, it just seems like with like books like this, like even like Marvel Comics Presents, where you had multiple stories, the multiple writers, they don't like reprint a lot of those either. So is it just like? Just with royalties and stuff, it's like, oh, you got, if you have at least 3 or 4 writers or more, it's just like, okay, so if someone downloads this, we're going to have this, or you have to like cut it up for everybody.
Yeah, but I mean, I get checks for 2 cents, so I don't think that there's a lot of big concern about like, oh my God, this is going to break our bank. If there was a need to sort of factor it out between multiple creatives.
I just think it's just such a huge backlog of things, and again, they probably have the interns doing this. Best I can tell.
Yeah, I don't think there's no holding back from this that I could think of. In terms of like, the rights are not right, or we're gonna have to pay off things, in a different way. All these characters are well established within Marvel. They're all within, work for hire agreements. At this point, Disney would have gotten anybody to sign over any new agreements or, refresh work for hire. Work for hire agreements, that and somebody either negotiated it well, like some people I know, or just took what they offered, like an idiot like me. And so I don't think there's any holdup except for the fact of,
is there like something in the memo line when you get your 2-cent check to know which book it was from?
Yeah, no, it says it.
Oh, okay.
You got to go look long. You get a long list, and and it's the print rights, or very few things we print rights now, except for if I ever get anything on Black Armor, but it's all digital rights, and stuff. So it'll be like digital reprints. So no, I guess I do get some print things when they do the big epic, collection. Of various things, the Nick Fury or the Black Widow or the Daredevil ones. I've gotten those print ones more recently, and they detail it out. 5 pages, 20 pages, 150 pages. So and then it gives you like a line
not
item.
Just like 2 cents from Disney. No clue.
No. You get a detailed like breakdown of it, but it is sometimes that kind of thing. It is sometimes you total it up and it's 49 cents. Of something like that. So, but
hey, people on Spotify understand.
It's exactly. I look at it as it's 49 cents I didn't have before, and sometimes it's more. Sometimes it's
And just a reminder that your art's out there in the world.
Yeah, and over a long course of time, I mean, they've kept track of it, and they continue to keep track of it, and sometimes it's added up. Sometimes it's added up over time, and then it's a lot of things at once, and then it's a not it's a not put my kid through college, check, but it's, oh, look,
There's a cup of
it's a
coffee.
nice dinner. It's a nice dinner check,
okay.
or something like that. So it gets to that level. And 30 years after the fact for stuff like that, that's nice. But it is just, like I said, sometimes, and however, Lilith, like you say, it's the digital, payment, the Spotify thing, sometimes that is ridiculous because I don't know how you calculate that. I don't know how they factor in how many people subscribe to Marvel Unlimited and then do they track impressions on certain books and downloads?
I think you have to read at least. I think it's kind of like the Kindle situation where you have to read at least 3 pages of the story. Something similar to that.
And so they're tracking you constantly doing that, I guess, but AI, man, it's all there. It's all working.
When you were reading this, was there anything that you were like, I wish I would have done this a little bit different, or I wish I would have elaborated on that, or anything like that?
Surprisingly for me, no.
Wow, I know.
Like I said, I think this is a great choice on your guys' part as a bookend with the Druid one, which again, I did not dislike the Druid one, but as a return to an early day thing, and looking at that and saying, yep, all the mechanics are there and they're okay. And it felt like a science project, at a high school, like, oh, look, here's this board and it's printed out and has all the right things Xeroxed and like colored in. And most of the stuff is inside the lines. And, it's a very sort of, put together and factually correct, presentation for the judges to come by. But this just felt like very breezy. It's not a deep story, even though it has deep themes and even though it draws from deep mythological, history. And, we leverage that extensively to sort of do the setup and the worry and the title is, directly lifted, I'm sure, from a Twilight Zone episode.
Yes, it is. A very early Twilight Zone.
Yeah, very early Twilight Zone episode. It's like one of the first, if not the first. So both of us on the deep cut there. But so I'm sure I contributed that, to it as we were thinking about it. But it just, like I said, it felt like it hit all the notes of what I feel are kind of, the spine of how I've told stories like over the years, right? Kind of the setup, of like the boom, 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 even the 3 or 4 opening, captions, nothing can survive what's about to happen, unless it was the intervention of a god, and one just happens to be around, that's not the sequence, but it has that sort of like 1, 2, 3 rhythm, I've used over and over again. The dialogue, again, I think is very, punchy and, fun, and the repartee and back and forth, has a good, energy and seems like it delivers most of the time in terms of the beats, the action and the resolution, with the arrows and him having to be the one, to do the thing that he had sworn not to do in order to be the hero of the moment. It's the classic, I can't, but I must, sort of, situation, which would have become like a challenge for some people at that point in time, with the, Jim Shooter had become very draconian at one point, about that being like an edict, in terms of the way heroes had to resolve their situation. That was not something Jim was contributing to here, but it is a sort of a, that's a good dramatic turn for a character, so there's that struggle, but it just, it felt, all cool, so I didn't have anything that I read it and said, oh man, that's like, that could have gone better. It's just like, yeah, perfect for what it is.
Oh yeah, that dilemma, like young Matt Murdock. Yes, Dad, I will never punch anyone ever.
Right. I will never learn fighting. Right. But that becomes, a lot of fodder to play out. And that is the struggle of a Daredevil, right? And I had a lot of fun with that.
If you don't have a guilty floating head, what are you even doing?
Yeah, are you even in a comic book if you don't have a floating head of guilt? Yeah.
It's not so much always guilt, right? It is that I can't, but I must, right? There's something I've sworn not to do. There's a line I cannot cross, but I have to do it in order to save these people, solve this situation, and give up on something. I can't lose the love of my life, but I must, and that's classic mythology too. That's 101. Mm-hmm. That's Joseph Campbell, 101. That's the hero's myth. That talking about my interest in mythology, we talked about this before, Joseph Campbell's, Hero with 1,000 Faces, which I would then overuse as well. But if you ever have a chance to read that book or look into that or watch his, program with Bill Moyer, that shows again and again through history, how there are those mythology things that repeat themselves, and they're always there with certain characters. And that the first point of that encounter is the call to adventure. You're drawn into something. And then when you have the adventure and you've achieved the goal, you can't go back to who you are, right? You can't go back because you've crossed over into something. So you may lose the love of your life, because of the choice you've made, but that's a necessity. You can't just go back to who you were before. Now, this story is not that deep, although there's that little, twang at the end, where, Hercules does the, but have I lost who I am, or whatever, that hand to brow thing as the arrow goes sailing off into space. Which is a little heavy handed for the rest of the story, but works, for the questioning aspect of the gods, because the gods weren't perfect. These gods were not perfect.
I mean, yeah, and again, you can't get too deep. I mean, you only have a certain amount of pages here. Would you be up for if they offered you, I don't know, Hercules miniseries or something? Or
oh yeah, Hercules is a fun character. I mean, chances are pretty good. C.B. Cebulski is not going to corner me at a thing and say, "Hey, we wanted to do a nostalgia thing on Hercules," like with Daredevil, but no, he's a fun character, and again, I'm sure there has got to have been a mini series at one point or another that somebody sold through on Hercules. What it was like or how well it was executed, I don't know, but he's a good character, and if you play with the mythology, there's dozens of story hooks, in there, and references and Easter eggs and things that you can, play out and draw out and have fun with. And that dichotomy between, you're talking about the food basket, right? Or his gluttony and his not gluttony, but his living life large, is a lot of fun, right? There's a swagger, to him that is not always there with some characters, even strong characters. A lot of strong characters are tortured or they're laborious. There's a fun quality to the swagger, which then has to get undercut at some point to then make the story interesting. Yeah, he was a ball to write here, and in typical fashion, why didn't I go back and pitch more Hercules stuff? Who knows?
Well, I was trying to remember. I think at this time, I think he might have been in and out of the Thor book, by Tom DeFalco and Ron Friends. So I don't know.
Sure, and he would have shown up in Avengers probably, right? He would have been hanging out at Avengers Mansion and doing his thing, and more me, Jarvis, he did the original, I'm sure, throwing the mug at the floor well before Thor ever got around to it, so I mean, that would be a fun. Marvel's got a lot to do to find their way back, in terms of movie and TV things. But I think a Hercules Marvel show would be a rip.
Oh yeah.
I mean, that would be a ball. Get the guy who plays Reacher, play Hercules or something like that, and that would be
which Reacher?
The current Reacher, not Tom Cruise. That would be pretty funny. The Tom Cruise Reacher is Hercules.
Tom Cruise Hercules.
Is there another Reacher? I'm sorry, I can't remember the actor's name. I should. is there another Reacher beyond those two?
I don't think so.
Okay. Or Alan
Richardson,
so, yeah. I mean, he's that. But you need somebody with that physicality, right? You need somebody with that ability to like really project the body and the presence. But I think a Hercules show would be a lot of fun. A limited show, 6 episodes, something like that. Just kind of go in, out, and have a good time and like that. I don't know if there's a Hercules in because I've sort of watched it in and out, but like that Chaos show I was talking about before, has a lot of fun with the different gods, and you can sort of see. If Hercules hasn't shown up, I should ask my wife because she definitely watched it all the way through.
You can't they can't copyright those mythological figures like that, or can they copyright their version of Thor and Hercules and all that?
Yeah, it's their version of it, right? That's what you do with those, open everything versions of it. Even though obviously some companies are always trying to kind of copyright everything. The word "it," we copyrighted that, or some nonsense. In that way, it's like the release of the copyright finally on certain things like Mickey Mouse or Winnie the Pooh.
F in the chat for Winnie the Pooh.
Yeah, and every
universe.
Right, and every idiot, with no imagination just runs immediately to like, well, let's do a slasher version of Winnie the Pooh, blood and honey, or whatever the frig it is.
Got a sequel. Somebody made it happen.
Somebody made it happen. Even without Troma Pictures, it's still
exactly.
Happens. Even Troma won't touch that one. But yeah, so I mean the Hercules, with that particular, chest straps and headband and that look and that sort of thing would be probably as far as Marvel, carries their thing. Could they trademark? He has done the 7 labors of Hercules. No. Could they, trademark, that he is a braggart character, who lives life large and, is shown his flaws through his actions and over ego and overconfidence? No. But those aspects of it. And if there was any supporting characters that were added along the way that were specific to the Marvel Universe, if they invented a mythological sidekick or weapon or, that wasn't necessarily part of the true, read the Bullfinch's mythology sort of thing, then that becomes, part and parcel of the mix of it. Thor, same thing, right? Thor is a character from Norse mythology, right? But everything around that, Don Blake, the particulars of the hammer, the particulars of the look, all those become, the mighty Thor. He's not Thor, he is the mighty Thor, right? That's what their trademark is on, is the mighty Thor, not Thor, per se.
I just had fun reading this because I'm always used to, maybe it's just because of what I've read from you before, like I'm always used to the street level Daredevil or Nick Fury. It's like, I'm not used to big mythology from you. Yeah, and I was like, oh man, I'm here for this. I'm here. I need more of this.
No, it's a lot of fun to play with, stuff like that. And I if you look back, what would I do differently, Lilith? Nothing with the story, but it would have been fun to play more, in those areas. As it turned out, I got pulled more into the realist zone of Marvel, in some instances, and by that I mean the Daredevils and the Nick Furies. Obviously, they're not real, but there's
more grounded,
even a little more grounded, in some ways. And so, that's where I ended up playing with a lot of stuff. Punisher, Cap, did some good work there, I think. But those had the same thing. But I never, except maybe in a scene or two of some things, didn't play with the Hulks or the Fantastic Fours or the Herculeses, as much. But they're obviously a lot of fun and certainly I was capable of doing it.
Oh yeah.
So, there's, the stuff we were talking about before the show, began, where I've been,
Yes.
teasing out some new stuff, from Black Box, a smaller publisher. And one of those is a very, there are ways out, but one of those is a very, sword and sorcery, sort of thing, is a more in a Hercules vein. If, that's not a direct line, but, more playing in that sort of, over the top, direction, big muscles, swords, creatures, little mythology, that I've stretched and twisted and, adapted, to fit the world and the story that's being built there. Certainly things I've always been a fan of. And when you're a fan of things and you appreciate, what's going on in spaces like that, you absorb it, and it's not the first thing you turn to create, but, like with this opportunity, both the Hercules one and this new thing, you find you've got the skills, hopefully.
So did they come to you for the sword and sorcery story? I mean, I know we're still at the very teasing phase here, but it's like, or were you like, hey, you know what? I haven't exercised this muscle in a while. Let me get fantastical here.
No, Dimitrios Zaharakis, who's the publisher and editor of Black Box, was a big fan of the Daredevil work I did with Scott McDaniel, Fall from Grace, and he had actually come to me a number of years ago when I was still more directly on staff with some of the advertising work I was doing, and he had talked to me about a project he had in mind, and I wasn't in a good mental place. One of my many times I wasn't in a good mental place. So it didn't come together. My fault, for that. He had an interesting idea and I started to kind of lean into it and I didn't really pursue it. But to his credit, he didn't hold that against me and actually came up to me at the same, Terrificon that CB had come up to me about that, Daredevil story, Black Armor. And available now in trade paperback format. Reintroduced himself, and I apologized for my former lack of follow through, and he had one idea because there's two ideas I've been teasing out from Black Box, and the other one is a sort of dystopian future, I'll say cyber thriller, but that's so let's go complete opposite ends of the spectrum. So he had the initial idea of it, of a character who does X and this might happen. So, a page or a paragraph of something kind of going on in that way. So I expanded that greatly and worked with him and then created like a whole 5-issue storyline, which is drastically expanded. So I've got co-creator credit on that when that comes out. And he liked that enough to then kind of come back and say, I've got this one paragraph, one page, high concept, sword and sorcery. Like that's the easiest way to sort of explain it in a quick telegraph
Black
way.
Box Comics, they kind of do one of three kinds of stories. Like within their universe, they all kind of have one of three similar themes. So
what are those? How would you define those, Lou?
Well, I mean, there's I've only read a couple. I know there's Dead Detective. I read that, Deadly Trails, but then a lot of the ones that I've been thinking about, there's Devil's Dominion, there's the Gin Hunter, there's Dream Master. Those all kind of fall in a certain thing, and then they have the crazy serial killers, detective, neo-noir kind of thing too.
What's the third one?
They have a couple of the Gospel of Jesus Christ, a visual presentation, and then there's another religious one that I can't think of, not religious, but just kind of in that vein. So kind of the catch-all.
Okay. Yeah, I mean they're good guys. They do good production values. I think the stuff looks good. They're well put together. But anyway, to do the roundabout sort of description, again the same situation. Beginnings of a thing. I expanded that, get co-creator credit when it comes out. It's a 5-issue, series there. But so, more they approached me, and I said, yeah, let's run with it, and I ran with it. I didn't feel constricted, by anything because it was new stuff. We actually worked a couple of places, Lilith, to make sure those steered away from direct comparisons, right, to some other stuff, like making sure it was, this is a little too much like Devil's Dominion. This is a little too much like whatever, so that it wasn't, wouldn't get lost amongst the other ones. But yeah, I think they have a certain overt quality, to their covers and the way they play things out. But they got a lot of titles at this point.
Yeah, they do.
So, but because they're working as a smaller publisher and working with a variety of artists who are fitting this in, amongst other things.
And I think they figured out the digital format better than most small publishers as well, at least.
Oh, do you? Why do you say that? Like, what is?
I mean, they're very solid. Like, they you don't have to wonder. Oh, I wonder if they have it out. It's right there on the website. Here, buy it here, buy it here.
Oh, good. Yeah. Okay. So it's easy to buy, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Other places you kind of have to fumble around. You have to Google, schmoogle. They're like, nope, go to the website. It's right there.
And there it is. I'm always giving him grief about the way he promotes his stuff, because it's always like, if you're looking for something to do this weekend, please consider the line of, Black Box, comics. I said, dude, it's got to be
but now, here, explosion!
A little bit, ramp it up.
Gotta grab him by the shirt, slap him in the face, be like, buy this now.
Give me your lunch money, nerds!
A little bit, not, there's a middle ground between the two, but, so when we're ready to kind of really push these, I'm pushing, you do what you want to do, but I'm going to do my thing.
Yeah, we enjoyed the Black Armor rollout.
Yeah, that's it. I have a similar idea in mind for these, because I think to me that was a fun way to tease it up and hit things continuously with art and story pieces and keep people intrigued. You never know what the reach is exactly, but there's certainly enough going on to be able to play that out.
Dan's like, I had no advertising. I have my own monthly podcast. Do this to me, kid.
Well, you can't depend on. I mean,
these days, no. You got it.
Love any day. I mean, it's sort of like.
I mean, the modern world. Yeah.
There was always the thing. You didn't have enough vehicle then. To sort of promote the stuff, but you couldn't depend. Nobody was promoting the Heroes Spring Special, with Hercules. It was going to be out there. It was going to be one among many things that Marvel was publishing that month. So, but if I was doing it now, I would do a lot more to promote even that singular story, and sort of push it and have some more thing behind it, but there was limited dollars, and Marvel or any publisher was only going to be able to put X amount behind something. So here's a house ad, and maybe here's a poster for the comic book store, and maybe we got you, in a trade publication that either liked you, and do a respectful, nice story, or they're going to dismiss you because you're not whoever, Frank Miller, and you're going to get a snarky, oh, Murdoch's life gets turned upside down again. Next, move on, and then you deal with that. Fortunately, that's.
I'm sorry, I joined a little late. I don't know if you guys talked about it. Do you have any news on issue 2
of Axel's Infernal?
Yeah.
Yes.
I have a killer trailer put together, and I've been debating with Carl when to kind of get the Kickstarter thing kind of going. The election season, coming up makes things sort of tricky to sort of time things out. So I think, we're launching it right in the midst of that is going to be problematic. And so kids go vote, go register to vote, please. And so I think I'm going to lean heavily into just, drumming up the pre-launch, and then probably not launch it until after November, once it hits a certain number this time, I think I talked about before. I think I launched the last one with too few numbers even on the pre-launch, whatever Kickstarter, page. I have to get that number up considerably more to try to make this one more. Even though the other one was successful, I feel like it was sort of like scraping by the, the skin of its teeth, and I don't want to be in that kind of situation 2 times out.
It's a big learning process, but yeah.
Yeah, it is. It is. Have you done it at all, Lilith? Or
I have so many friends that have done it, like so many.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think do you know of any? Does everyone that you know do Kickstarter, or does any? Like, I've been looking at Indiegogo
for sure. Indiegogo is more for like films and stuff.
Okay.
It's kind of like how my creative friends kind of differentiate.
All right. I mean, I know a lot of creators who do Indiegogo as well. So, but I've been trying to sort of figure out, like, is there one
for comic books, the community is just kind of there and a little more engaged for Kickstarter.
Yeah. I mean, I think if I did a lot of softcore or hardcore pornography cover variants, we'd probably do better. That seems to be a big thing, but probably we're not going to do that. When I look at a lot of like the comics, it's like, look, we've got 30 not safe for work cover variants, and and we have a story in there too.
He'll never pander to that. Violence, yeah, we'll get some violence, but no, not that.
It's sort of like, I've got a main female character who's, it just doesn't feel like respectful to her.
No, yeah.
Wouldn't feel respectful under any circumstance, but especially like, in service to the character. It does not feel like
and then you have to think what that looks like, the prospective customers and stuff, and
yeah, and exactly. If anyone notices, they'll come after it, right?
Or the maniacs who are like, we need more of this in the book. And it's like, no, that's not what I'm writing.
That too.
Yeah.
Yes, totally.
All right, good. I did want to talk about your upcoming project, which again, keep us in the loop. Yeah, once there's more information to share.
The trailer's pretty killer. I mean, I hired the same voiceover actress I did for the first one, and she did a really great job. And I read it. That's all kind of ready to go. So that's looking really, really good. So I think you guys will get a kick out of that. And I will premiere it here. Or if we want to go through it. So, all right.
So. All right, for next time, I purposely didn't pick anything. I know for October, I think Lilith was saying maybe we should do some Hellraiser stuff. I haven't read any of your Hellraiser yet, so I don't know if Lilith, do you want to pick? Dan, do you want to pick?
Yeah, let's let him pick. Like, what's your favorite couple of issues of Hellraiser?
What's your Hellraiser that you want to do?
Well, there's a lot of big stuff to do in Hellraiser. There's the huge mega story. I had done with Dwayne McDuffie, and then we sort of interwove other people, called the Devil's Brigade, but that's almost like its own bigger thing to talk about. But why don't we pick, hang on, I can't, I have to figure out which, give me a second.
Okay.
All right, find Hellraiser 13.
Nice.
With nice. I did a story with Mike Mignola called Dead Things Rot, which has I thought it was a tremendous amount of fun to do, and it's been called out a couple of times as one of the better horror stories, Hellraiser stories, in that context. So find that one. If you can't find it, let me know, and I'll scan it in and send it your way. But we can talk about that, and we can expand the conversation into Hellraiser, more directly.
It's such a fascinating universe overall, really, truly. It's so people don't know how deep the Hellraiser rabbit hole goes. It's very interesting.
Oh yeah, no, it's fabulous. Clive unleashed some very very cool stuff that's beyond just being dragged to hell. There's a lot to be done there, and I think when you explore it the right way, when you explore it in the wrong way, it just becomes this Crypt Keeper, bad O. Henry, twist ending sort of stuff, or torture porn. I read this more current horror thing recently, like a horror anthology book. It was like a 2-issue thing, and it's like the greatest creators of today. And I was expecting there's going to be some really thoughtful horror stuff here. And by and large, it was a lot of like, oh shit, I've unleashed the demon. Oh, we've all been torn to pieces. And it's like, for fuck's sake, people. Like, just. Not that I haven't done that myself, but when you're going to promote like that in that way, like do me some early gen Black Mirror stuff, where you're really kind of like screwing with my head and, making me distinctly uncomfortable, and hit me with some Midsommar and Hereditary, and type of vibe. And, that's what, you should be coming forward with, not just the, some gruesome, panel and that type of thing.
All right, I'm going to go there. So you're saying, give us stuff that makes us think. Don't just go for the random carnage.
Yeah, I mean, and this, listen, when you look at the story, there's some good random carnage in it. But I mean, it's also like, this story is a little bit of, a twist ending, and it's all the things I just said you shouldn't do. But it's with Mike Mignola, so it's great. And
but Hellraiser, all my Hellraiser questions for that.
Yeah, but when when Hellraiser worked, especially as a comic, I mean, we didn't do all our best stuff only in issue 1, but I still look at his issue 1 as a high watermark of what that world could do in comics, because we hit 4 or 5 different like angles, all of which were distinctly different. Let's save this conversation, for that one, and we could always do more Hellraiser. But yeah, Hellraiser's great for October. I don't know if I still have a
don't open the puzzle box, please.
Don't open the box. Don't open the box. I might still have my my fold your own one that we did as like a little thing to comic book shops. And I should pull that out, and we can make that a giveaway for the show.
Oh, nice.
All right.
All right. Stuff. So anything else you want to promote? Any appearances or no?
No. My wife's still, getting over the summer vacation, tripathon. So I'm staying close to to home for the time being, and I don't think anything's going to come up between now and the end of the year, since I had to cancel those last 2 at the end of the summer. So I'll be here working on stuff, and we'll see each other in October.
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
See you then.
Thank you so much.
All right, guys. Enjoy your Saturday. Take care.
You too.
Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye. All right. So, yes, there's your homework, kids. Hellraiser 13. I like that he picked. All right. So, yes. So, send us your thoughts for, the Hercules. You can send your thoughts on the Hercules story, your questions. But definitely send your questions for the Hellraiser 13 and any Hellraiser questions. CapesandLunatics@gmail.com, or call the voicemail 614-382-2737. That's 614-38-CAPES. And you can find all of our stuff, social media, merchandise, everything at tubespace.ao/CapesandLunatics Podcast Network. And you can always help support us at patreon.com/CapesandLunatics, where you'll get exclusive episodes just for you. Heck, September episode, we're going to be, ranking the Alien franchise. So
the results may shock you.
Little results always shock you. All right, kids. So thank you for joining us, and come back next month for a hell-raising good time. Peace.